Did you know that if you earn overtime and you're trying to apply for a mortgage loan, that you might not be able to use that overtime to qualify? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about how to calculate overtime income. Now, I'm doing the guidelines. I'm creating a video for each one of the guidelines. So today we're going to talk about Freddie Mac mortgage underwriting guidelines. Now, Freddie Mac is an underwriting guidelines for conventional financing. So when you're applying for a mortgage, you can get conventional financing, which uses underwriting guidelines that were written by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or you can do a government loan or government financing, which is FHA, VA, or USDA. Now, USDA, in order to qualify for a USDA loan, you have to be buying in an area that's eligible for USDA. So that's not normally an underwriting guideline, or that's not normally something that you would look into unless you're looking in that area. Also, if you've never served in the armed forces, then you may not be eligible for a VA loan. So what I want to kind of focus on is if you're not military and you're not buying in the USDA area, and you have overtime, I would watch this video, look at the Fannie Mae video, and look at the FHA video. So those three videos on calculating your overtime are going to apply to everyone. Right. So you don't have to be you don't have to buy in a certain place. You don't have to have a certain work experience or experience there. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, all of the underwriting guidelines, all of the agencies are essentially looking at the same two things. They're looking at your history of receiving overtime, and then they're looking to see if that overtime is consistent, increasing, or decreasing over time. Okay. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, all look at these things differently. So this is how Freddie Mac looks at it. Freddie Mac is going to look for a 2-year history. Okay. So if you look at the Fannie Mae guidelines, Fannie Mae will accept less than a 2-year history of having overtime with compensating or positive factors. The Freddie Mac guidelines just say 2 years. They don't say that they're going to do less than 2 years. Now, here's another thing. Let me interject this. Guidelines are not rules, usually. They're usually not rules. Most of the time, guidelines are guardrails that the underwriter is trying to stay within those guardrails, but they also have the ability to make what's called underwriter discretion, which is they have the ability to interpret the guidelines in a way that's going to benefit the employer that they work for. Sometimes that looks like overlays, which means that they have guidelines that are more strict than regular guidelines. But sometimes it just means that it's the way that they interpret it. So, and if you watch the Fannie Mae guideline and it says they may accept less than 24 months with compensating factors, that's underwriter discretion. Freddie Mac is not indicating underwriter discretion when they're talking about the history of receiving overtime. So if you're watching this and you do not have 2 full years of income or taxes that have overtime income on them, you might want to look at the Fannie Mae video. Okay. History of receiving overtime. The underwriter is going to review all the year-to-date earnings and compare those earnings with the earnings from the last 1 to 2 years. They're going to look to see if it's increasing or if it's consistent or if it's increasing. So most lenders are going to use the previous year and the year-to-date income, and they're going to average that income. So when we talk about overtime income, like if you looked at your pay stub this year, let's say you look at your pay stub and it says year to date overtime income, the underwriter is not going to use that. They're going to use that as part of a calculation and add that to the previous years, your history of receiving income. Usually it's 2-year history and then previous year plus year to date. They're going to add that together. So say today is February, so 12 months of last year, 2 months of this year. So maybe what they'll do is they'll take those 14 months and then divide that by 14. So they're going to take the total overtime over that 14 months, divide by 14, and then that's the number they're going to use for your overtime income, which is going to be separate from your regular income. So when the loan officer is asking for your income, it's not just everything that you made if you're making overtime. It's not just the bottom line number. Your steady income, which is either hourly or salary or however you get paid, that is in one box. And then that's actually what you earned. And then when you're talking about overtime, overtime is variable income. It comes and goes. It's not consistent. You're not always working overtime. You're not always working the exact number, the same number of hours in overtime usually. If you are, then the average isn't going to matter because the overtime is always going to be the same and you're always going to be able to use that number. Now, if you have declining income, so if your overtime has been declining from the previous year, the underwriter has to conduct a further analysis. They need to understand, you need to give them a reason for the decline. They need to look at the trend. Has it been happening recently? Has it been happening over time? And they need to document it and exactly why it is, and determine whether you can use this as stable income. If this is stable income that can be used to qualify, because if it's declining, if the underwriter determines that the income is stable, they're going to use the most conservative amount. So if the income is declining, again, this is the same scenario. Like if you watch the Fannie Mae video, I go into this a little bit more as well. But essentially what they're looking at is if it's declining, if it declined, but it's now stable, the underwriter is probably not going to average that over time. They're going to use the lowest amount. They're going to use the stabilized version. They're not going to average in when your overtime was higher. So if you've been getting about the same overtime for the last 6 months and it's lower than the overtime you got in the previous year, they will use the fact that you have a 2-year history, regardless of how much the overtime is. So there's your history piece. And then the amount of income they're going to be able to use is they're going to use the most conservative calculation of that income, which would be the reduced overtime that you're currently receiving, not taking into account the fact that that overtime was higher in the past. So, was that confusing? It's not confusing. It's not hard, but it's very, very complex. And the challenge is anytime you have variable features in your loan qualification process, you are going to start having challenges with lazy or inexperienced loan officers. And most of those lazy and inexperienced loan officers work in call centers. And it is almost impossible for you as a consumer to avoid getting into one of those call centers if you do a Google search on how do I qualify for a mortgage, right? So the reason I'm doing these videos is to kind of show you how many variables are involved in underwriting guidelines. And I really want you to understand how experience by a loan officer is so important, because if I was an inexperienced loan officer and you had less than 2 years worth of overtime and you were trying to qualify for a Freddie Mac conventional loan and I couldn't get you approved, if I had enough experience, I would know to try Fannie Mae, because Fannie Mae doesn't require a 2-year experience. Or actually what what happens far more often is that you're talking to the loan officer from the call center and you're telling them that you've only been getting overtime for 18 months. And they say, oh, sorry, there's a two-year history required. We're not going to be able to use any of your income to qualify. So those are the types of things that happen is inexperienced loan officers know that there is a guideline and they may know one of the guidelines. It might be the FHA guideline. It might be the Fannie guideline. It might be the Freddie guideline. So the moral of the story is you want to work with an experienced loan officer. How do you work with an experienced loan officer? Well, if you enjoyed this video, if you feel like I'm coming from a place of over 20 years in the mortgage business that I have been, then I think you'll appreciate the fact that I can help you with this search. So at findmywayhome.com is a website that I started in 2008 when the last mortgage industry crashed. I did it to help educate and empower consumers to make more informed decisions, because there's a lot of people that call themselves loan officers out there that just work in call centers and they don't know anything about qualifying for a mortgage. They're just reading off of a computer screen and they're telling you yes when the answer might not be yes, or they're telling you no when the answer might not be no. So there's a couple of ways that you can get connected with an expert that is more than happy to answer your questions about qualifying for a mortgage. The first way is you can go to findmywayhome.com, and there's a link below in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can click on that link there, so you can ask a question there, and I will match you with somebody who is licensed in your state that can help you, somebody that I know, like, and trust. Or you can scroll to the bottom of the website, click on the state that you're in, and you'll see a list of loan officers that I know, like, and trust, that are creating content, that are educating consumers, just like I'm doing here. And you can watch their videos and you can determine who you want to work with. But everybody on my network, everybody in the findmywayhome.com website, are people that I know, like, and trust, that have years and years of experience. And they're more than happy to walk through all of this with you and answer all of your questions coming from a place of experience. So again, if you are trying to qualify for a mortgage and you have overtime income, be sure that you watch the Fannie Mae episode and the FHA episode just to see if one of these three options is going to overcome any challenges that you might be having with your overtime, and give you that extra money that you need to qualify for the home that you're applying for. So I hope this is helpful. And if you have any questions, ask me questions below. Go to findmywayhome.com. And I hope you have a great day, and congratulations on your journey towards home ownership. All right. See you next time. Bye.